Hello and welcome to our presentation, Active Defense Scenarios, a quarterly exercise that promotes security posture. Your presenters today are myself, Robert Moody, and Robin Williams. Agenda. We're going to give you a quick disclaimer. We're going to walk through who we are and why you're listening to us. We're going to talk about the threats all around us. We're going to go into what is active defense, the phases of an active defense mission selection and planning, threat hunting and establishing a baseline, security control validation testing, hardening and retesting, and finally, reporting and lessons learned. And then we'll end it with a question and answer. Disclaimer, fun part. All content contained in this presentation are solely the views of the presenters and do not represent the opinions, beliefs, experiences, policy, or operating agreements of any of the organizations the speakers currently work for or have worked for in the past. Next slide, please. Speaker introductions. As I said, my name is Robert Moody. I'm a cyber threat intelligence and incident response expert. I currently work as a cyber intel manager for the Home Depot. I lead a team in charge with the monitoring and proactive defense of our threat landscape, which is all of North America. I hold certifications, the CISM, CISA, CDPSC, all from ISACA. I held the CREST Registered Threat Intelligence Analyst certification. I have a master's in cybersecurity from IE University and a MBA from Quantic School of Business and Technology. I've been doing this a long time, for about a decade, defending critical infrastructure ranging from manufacturing, banking, finance, telecommunications, retail, which I work in now, and energy. Let me kick it over to my co-speaker, Robin. All yours, sir.
Hey, thanks, Robert. My name is Robin Williams, currently a Purple Team lead for the Home Depot. I've been doing offensive and defensive security for almost a decade now, working as a consultant for most of that time across multiple industries, including banking, finance, telecommunications, and retail.
So let's talk about the threats all around us. You pick up a newspaper every day, what you're probably going to see is some form of breaking news cyber attack, whether it's Log4j or a multitude of different actors and nation states, organized crime groups. There's really an endless supply of these stories coming out. You go to the next slide, please. Some of those stories that I mentioned, most of these are from 2021. So you have Hafnium, which is blamed on Chinese state government. They attacked Microsoft Exchange servers throughout the world. Accenture, the global consultancy, accounting firm as well, was attacked by Lockbit Gang. They downplayed it, but there seems to be reporting that came out around some of their customers and their data being affected. Gigabit was hit by the ransom EXX ransomware. A new APT was targeting hotels, and hackers breached the Colonial Pipeline. Being here in the US, I know we all felt the gas prices increase. I drove a pickup truck. I know that was not a fun one for me. But as I said, multitude of attacks across different industries and different types of advanced actor groups. But what can you do about it? You go to the next slide, please. Well, you need to start monitoring, for instance, the bears, spiders, and kittens. Those are the fun names coming up with by CrowdStrike for different advanced persistent threat groups. Next slide, please. So again, how do you defend against these attackers? How do you stop advanced attacks before they even occur? Well, Robin and my solution is active defense. We'll go through what that is. So active defense, it's an intelligence-led cross-team exercise that evaluates an organization's readiness for a cyber attack. So we leverage our understanding from an intelligence perspective of what tools, techniques, and procedures exist in the wild during realistic cyber attacks. So when all of those bears, kittens, and spiders go after an organization in real life, so the news stories that we showed a second ago, what techniques are being used in those attacks? We as an Intel team go through, we enumerate them, we grab them, and then we work with a team like Robin's in purple, which is the purple team. And we test our security controls and we harden our security controls off the results of what Robin and his team do. We try to cause the most pain to an adversary as possible. And that's by going after the pyramid of pain there. We go after the things that are the most difficult for them to change. So the TTPs, the tools, we try to stay away from artifacts like IP addresses and hashes just because they can be more easily changed. So what does an active defense mission specifically test? Our ability to identify and disrupt an attack. So we look at the tools, techniques, and procedures of the cyber adversary. We then look at the efficacy of the tools. So how well is our endpoint detection response tool responding to host-based attacks? How well is our email hygiene solution stopping phishing messages? And we enumerate through the attack chain of the actor we want to emulate. We do pre and post mission state, so we understand where we were and where we are after the mission, and we harden our controls during that time period in between. And then we gauge the willingness and ability of the organization's security teams to cooperate and innovate against these techniques. Anything else you'd like to add, Robin?
Nope.
Awesome. Let's go to the next slide then. So the phases of active defense. I've alluded to them, talked about some of the terminology in there, but let's go to the phases themselves. So looking at the chain here, I recommend if you have the manpower for it to be a continuous process. In organizations I've worked for and collaborating with Robin in the past, we've shot to do it once a quarter. But again, depending on the size of your security teams, what resources you have available, and the other things going on, it can change. But doing it on a quarterly basis ensures that you have 4 advanced tests a year, which really do help to build up your security controls. But phase 1 is the mission selection and planning. That can take 3 to 4 weeks. What you want to do during that phase is really work as a team to understand what threats are relevant to you, and then design a test around which teams you want involved, things along those lines. Then you go into the threat hunting and establishing a baseline. Why do you do this? You want to understand that the actor, adversary, malware, the topic you've chosen for the mission isn't currently impacting your organization. You want to have those zeros across the board. None of the hashes or indicators that you're looking for associated with the threat are existing in your environment. You do this to ensure that you do not pollute the test, and the results you get back are actually your team testing. So you can have a isolated sample of the way in which your controls work. Then you go to the control testing. That should take about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the scope of the assessment. Obviously, if you test more techniques, the security control validation testing can increase. There are tools that'll help you automate this, but in reality, shoot for 2 to 3 weeks, 1 to 2 for threat hunting, and 3 to 4 for mission planning. So after you've done your initial tests, you want to then work with your security teams, the experts over those spaces, and that's about 3 to 4 weeks to build out new hardened controls. Then you need to do your retesting, which that should take about 1 to 2 weeks if you have the infrastructure already built out from the initial validation testing. And then reporting is 2 to 3 weeks. Highly recommend building templates. There's ways to make this quicker, but in reality, you want to build some buffer time. And that's the phases of active defense and what it looks like from a timeline perspective. Go to the next slide, please, Robin. So we're going to talk a little bit about this first stage, the mission selection and planning. So what do you look at to make a good mission topic? You should see whether it's adversary-based or campaign-based. You would look at your security controls and understand your environment. As an in-house team, I can tell you that I know very well who is on the radar, who are the topics. If you conduct a yearly assessment of the threat landscape, or you keep pretty good track of the news, you'll know who is in your space, who's going after your sector. You want to ask yourself a couple of questions. You want to ask, is it relevant to your organization? Is it relevant to your suppliers, to your peers? Do you have enough data to build a threat model? Do you have enough data to test against your security controls? You're looking at this and you're trying to massage out a scenario that is relevant to a specific adversary you're interested in, a campaign, a piece of malware, something of interest to the organization, something interested to your suppliers, and something interesting for your peers. That's how you know you have something of a topic that's focused in enough and relevant enough to your organization and your company, your security team. Go to the next slide, please, Rob. Again, you want to look at what's going on in the news. Do you want to test hafnium if you're do a lot of business via email? Do you worry about ransomware? Is that a big topic for you? Are you in the hospitality sector and worried about this new APT targeting hotels? Are you in energy and worried about being hacked similar to what Colonial Pipeline was? Or you, again, another ransomware topic? What is important to your organization? What's important to your board? What's important to your leaders? I can tell you as an Intel team, that's super important for us. And we work every day to make sure we have that understanding. So when questions arise, like what is our susceptibility to an attack by a group like Hackathon? Or what is our susceptibility to a ransomware attack? We can put together tests and missions like an active defense for these topics. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to go a little bit about what threat modeling is and what we mean by threat modeling. So when we build a threat model, we want to develop a complex, multi-staged use case based off of threats targeting our critical assets. There's a lot there to unpack, but the multi-stage and complex piece is what I want to call your attention to. We want to look at things like building a threat profile. So it does involve spoofing, tampering, reputation impact, information disclosure, denial of service, encryption if it's a ransomware game, elevation of privilege, lateral movement. What goes into that threat profile? Well, you model the threat. What does the business concept look like? What type of architecture do you want to test? What security controls? Where does the data flow come from? Where does your most secure data and crown jewels reside? Is this threat context something that you as an Intel team, or you as a Purple team know about? You want to do a risk assessment. What is cyber risk to you? Is it threat times vulnerability times impact? Is it do you define threat as capability times likelihood? How do you go about defining all of this? And once you have this input and you understand the way the threat behaves and you're building out these multi-stage complex scenarios, you want to move in to make sure that your detection logic is developed in a way that you can identify suspicious activities similar to the threat profile you've built out. You want to be able to identify the events, the malicious behavior. This is something that you should be able to detect when you test. So the way we work is that we identify a specific group. We build out the threat profile around them, the way that they would behave going after specific technologies, and what do we have that would stop them from accessing our data. And we align those techniques to the MITRE attack framework. Can you go to the next slide, please? As I said, MITRE attack. So we use MITRE attack as an industry standard to help build out that profile of the threat. We prioritize via a threat model, so critical threat, high threat, moderate threat, informational threat. We prioritize the techniques based off of who's using them. It's a common lexicon that we can share across disciplinary teams. Robin's team, from an offensive and defensive standpoint, is much different than my team, which would be Intel. But we use the same language because we both stick to MITRE. We can reflect new campaigns or attack methodologies. The framework is constantly evolving. There's new adversaries, new techniques constantly uploaded. I believe we're on version 10 now. They do a really good job including relevant data. Like during the hafnium attack, which we had, they updated the tools and technologies there. Same with SolarWinds. A lot of those tools started showing up in the matrix so that teams can go through and build out the models they want. In the same line, they have training courses out, which are free, which can help teams understand and build their own mappings. But everything in MITRE is tied back to real attacks observed in the wild. I want to highlight that. And that's one of the most important parts for our testing. And the reason we use this model and framework is because this is all real things that have happened. It also maps back to security and privacy controls via NIST SP 853. This linkage offers potential suggestions that we can provide to more of the strategic or architecture teams, which helps to bridge that gap as well. Anything you'd like to add, Ron?
Nope.
Rock on. All right, can we go to the next slide? All right, so we want to talk today about the Venomous Bear. This was a group we chose at random, but when we look at this group, they're very interesting. We wanted to show what crafting a narrative and a mission scope looks like. So the way we would do this is we would talk a little bit about the group. So Turla, or venomous bear, is a sophisticated Russian-based adversary attributed to the FSB, or Russian Federal Security Service. Turla has infected victims in 45 countries, spanning range of industries including government, embassies, military education, research, and pharmaceutical companies. I'm going to stop there for a second. As you can see on the screen, it's bolded that 45 countries and then the range of industries affected. To have a good narrative and a good scope, we recommend including where the attacker has gone. So Turla has attacked a wide range of countries in the West. We talk about where they're attributed to if you have that information. And then we talk about the industries. So we help focus in. So this would be a scenario that would fall into one of the industries listed below. So if it's government, if it has to do with military, if it's the educational sector, if it's research, if it's pharmaceutical companies, right there we help gauge the interest and why it's important to the organization. Then we take it a little bit historical. So what has Turla done? How long have they been active? Well, Turla has been active since 2004. Turla is known for conducting watering hole and spearfishing campaigns, leveraging in-house tools and malware. So that talks a bit about how they behave. And then we say Turla's espionage platform is mainly used against Windows machines, but has also been seen used against Mac OS and Linux machines. That helps set the scope. So we know that we want to test the effectiveness of a Turla similar or emulated attack that uses watering hole and spearfishing campaigns and in-house tools and malware specifically targeted to Windows devices, Mac devices, and Linux devices. And that's how we focus on what we're going to test. And then you take it to what we're going to do. So because Turla adopts new and complex techniques to maintain operational security, they have prominent command and control networks that heavily focus on those operational security concerns. We're going to build an active defense mission around the tools, techniques, and procedures observed in the wild during Turla intrusions. So we've done a lot there with this crafting the mission scope, but by doing this in the way that we've shown, we set up for a very complex, multi-staged mission, just as we said we would do in the threat model. Robin, can you go to the next slide, please? So again, very heavy on the MITRE attack side of this. This ensures that we have very specific techniques to test against. So we use this example running with Turla. We want to look at Turla's access token manipulation, so create, process, and token. Turla uses RPC backdoors that can impersonate or steal tokens before executing commands. We also want to look at things on the way in which Turla discovers group policies. So that's T1615. Turla surveys a system upon check-in to discover group policy details using the GP result command. So as you can see, there's quite a few different techniques. It's kind of like a burger menu, so you choose what toppings you want, but you can also choose which techniques you want to test for the mission. You may not want to test all of these. You want to make focus specifically on those Windows, Linux, or Mac-based techniques. It's really about what you want to do from that perspective. We got these techniques and the explanations around them from the MITRE attack website. We recommend using that as a resource, but there's also security researchers who put out MITRE attack map data, quite a few vendors like CrowdStrike, FireEye. A lot of them have adopted the MITRE attack framework as well and are publishing reports that map activity back to the MITRE attack framework. So when you build out your mission, you should have a lot of data to rely on and use. Robin, anything you'd like to add on this one?
Nope. I think it's important to have a fair bit amount of coverage across different tactics and techniques within the MITRE attack life cycle. So it's always a good idea to have as much as possible across the entire attack life cycle. This way, when you're testing, you can kind of add a definitive reference point onto where you're having control successes or control failures through this attacker's life cycle.
That's a really good point. That helps you frame out when your security team would be successful and unsuccessful in detecting an attack. How far is too far in the environment? Great point, Robin. Could you go to the next slide, please, sir? All right. So now we're into planning your mission. So we've listed a whole bunch of key stakeholders, but again, we want a complex multi-stage mission. So the more stakeholders you involve, the more in-depth your mission will be. Some common teams are CTI, which is cyber threat intelligence, blue team, which is your defensive team, endpoint detection and response teams, network security, network operations, firewall, cloud, DLP, DFIR, vulnerability management, and purple team. So we've hit a lot of different teams there. And again, you need to base this by your own organization if you're thinking about running an active defense mission. If you have the capabilities and relationships across all those teams and more, great, bring them in. My recommendation is to make sure that you explicitly say the responsibilities and actions expected of each team. That'll ensure you won't get anyone too confused. Nobody will step outside their bounds. Everything will be very neatly done. In this initial phase of the active defense mission, the deliverables should be active defense mission plan, a kickoff meeting, having your leadership team sign off on the mission, and metrics around the time to plan the mission. So you should know how long it took you to build the mission, get everybody bought in, and agree on the next steps. Can you go to the next slide, please, Robert? So we're now at threat hunting and establishing a baseline. Go to the next slide, please.
All right, yeah. So just a quick overview here of threat hunting and starting to establish a baseline in your environment. So the threat hunting phase of an active defense mission involves collecting indicators of compromise, specifically associated with the adversary or campaign that was described back in the mission plan. So the reason we do this this IOC-based hunting is to check our environment before Purple Team conducts security control validation. So you're gathering up these indicators of compromise. You're going through each of your security controls, whether it be EDR, web app controls, antivirus, looking through those with these specific IOCs, and then determining if you're actually going to be starting your testing in a clean environment based upon what is already known about this adversary. Once this IOC-based threat hunt baseline is established, from there you can move to the next phase of actually beginning to test these security controls. So some primary teams that are typically involved during this threat hunting phase of an active defense mission: the blue team, SOC analyst, endpoint detection and response, maybe network security teams, so they could take a look at firewalls, web gateway team, so they could take a look at the web gateway on traffic, based upon the IOCs that have been collected. And a critical piece, cyber threat intelligence, who provides these indicators of compromise and feeds them to these other teams so they can begin their hunt and determining a clean environment prior to the execution of the security control validation testing. Yep, so collecting indicators for threat hunting. CTI teams, they will use open and closed source intelligence source areas to look at specific threats outlined in the active defense mission. So here you can see we have some indicators for the Turtle group, which include MITRE attack techniques, domains that have been used in previous campaigns, hashes, targeted organizations, any vulnerabilities that they've been able to successfully exploit upon intrusion into an organization or entity, and things like that. So this is just a quick look at that. So establishing our baseline, right? So kind of the outline steps in the process of establishing your baseline. The blue team performs intelligence-based hunting to identify host-related IOCs related to Turla's previously observed tactics. The EDR team, at the same time, the blue team is going through their tools. The EDR teams are using your organization's endpoint protection solution to perform a deeper, more granular intel-based hunt, looking specifically for any command line activity that could relate to Turla, command and control, persistence, or lateral movement techniques. So this is kind of before. It's kind of like a phase before a more proactive type of threat hunt. So we're just looking at command line activity that is known already. Has this Turla adversary executed, run DLL 32 commands via the command prompt, and it's very, very, very specific. So in this phase as well, the blue team is made aware of any Sigma rules, which is a common nomenclature that's vendor agnostic based rules that allow organizations to then convert those rules into tool-specific or vendor-specific rules that can be used to further hunt for Turla, MITRE attack TTPs and logs on host and the network and things like that. But Sigma is really great because it provides a quick, rapid way for us to develop rules and to get those out to the blue teams. So in this phase, typical deliverables include adversary activity baseline, if there is any. So your baseline will either kind of show nothing or it will show a problem. An adversary has been detected in your environment, specifically Turla in this case, right? And then you would have to put off testing and kind of handle that as a separate incident before you did your security control validation testing. Metrics on IOCs identified by the blue team and EDR teams during the threat hunt, and then metrics on the time it took for the threat hunt to from start to end, I should say, to get those IOCs and then execute on essentially a discovery phase of the intel-based hunting. Security control validation testing. So this is what I'm biased because I'm on the purple team, but this is what I view to be the bread and the butter of active defense missions. So establishing a baseline in threat hunting is super important. And it's good to know that you either have an issue on your hands or an incident on your hands if you do discover something based upon the active defense mission, or that you have a clean environment. But it doesn't end there, right? So from a purple team perspective, security control validation testing is where myself and my team come in during an active defense mission, and we take a look at that CTI provided intelligence. We look at that MITRE attack threat model, TTP specific to that adversary Turla in our example. We'll take a look at the commands that were executed on hosts during their compromises of different organizations. What processes did they leverage? What type of command and control infrastructure are they using? Is it Cobalt Strike type of HTTP, HTTPS type of C2 infrastructure? Is it DNS? And things like that. So we'll take a granular look, a more detailed look at that intelligence and start to build out our own kind of pseudo Turla adversary, replicating Turla typically with an 80-20 approach, where 80% is as close as possible to the adversary, such as Turla, and then we account for any variances that might occur or any growth that adversary might have. So adversaries grow, they mature, they change TTPs and things like that. And we do want to account for that. So we kind of have a 20% variance on that. So why do we do this? Security control validation testing for these in the wild TTPs is performed to determine the efficacy of the pre-mission state an organization's security controls. So how does our web gateway hold up to this malicious web traffic coming through this very specific way that Turla does it? How does our EDR detect, or does it detect, or does it not? How does it handle what Turla does when it compromises an organization? And that gives us an insight into the ability of our controls to detect, alert, and block the techniques used by the adversary of interest. So the who, again, a red team or a purple team, ideally a purple team, just because of the expertise both offensively and defensively. It's good to have those mindsets together on that one team to execute on something like this. But if you just have the capabilities to execute offensively, kind of without that defensive mindset on that team, then a red team works just fine as well. And then again, cyber threat intelligence, really critical to this part of the process, as they provide the MITRE attack threat model, any other type of intelligence pieces that we would need to use. So continuing on, so just to dive deeper into the steps of the security control validation process, CTI team will provide the red team or purple team with a MITRE attack threat model that details all of the different techniques utilized by Turla in our example. The purple team will then take those, build out their own adversary to execute either automated in an ideal situation. You would want to automate, as much as possible using a breach and attack simulation platform. Or if a more manual test is required, that's on the table too. That's why we have that offensive security perspective and experience on the purple team. But this would just be a test of the Turla in the wild techniques. Checking each TTP against each of our organizational security controls. So then from there, purple team will produce a current state analysis of the organization's security controls that are within scope of the active defense mission. Purple team will take that analysis and brief the CTI team with the security control validation assessment results, and then provide any recommendations. If anything was noted as a gap, let's say you're testing Turla TTPs on a host that is in an area of the network that has some logging misconfigurations. So you're going through your Windows event logs in your SIEM, and you find that your host is missing all these Windows event logs. Well, that becomes a gap, and it becomes a finding. And part of your recommendation is to ensure that there are no other missing logs in the environment across all of your Windows hosts, for example, since we're looking at Windows events. And then kind of determine and recommend a way forward from there, right, to increase that logging coverage or security control coverage. So some deliverables in this phase: security control validation assessment results, security control improvement recommendations, metrics on the efficacy of the security controls. What is being alerted? What is being blocked? What is being missed? More importantly, right? And then metrics on time to test the efficacy of the security controls, kind of a start and an end date on how quickly you can test those TTPs against your own security controls, right? This is just an example of some TTP-specific security control validation test results. So you can see we have the MITRE attack tactic. We do a lot of everything based around MITRE attack. The framework, it works for us. We're able to connect multiple pieces to MITRE attack. So as Robert was talking about, we're able to convert something like these test results that you see on the screen here back to NIST to provide a more organizational view at security control failures in those specific areas. So what you're seeing here is it's kind of like the first output, right? MITRE attack tactic, executes persistence, exfiltration, lateral movement, MITRE attack technique, where we're letting them know what specific technique that we executed on and mapping it back to MITRE, and then a pre-mission current kind of a current state endpoint detection rate. So did we miss everything with command and scripting interpreter? We would put 0% there. Did we get everything somewhere else, like exploitation of remote services? We would mark it as 100%. All of our security controls were able to either alert or block that specific TTP. So our objective when we're testing is to ensure that our security controls are properly tuned, running correctly, not missing any data, but also can it prevent what we're trying to execute as an adversary, or can it provide our SOC analysts with a heads up and alert so that they're able to respond quickly at the earliest part of the attack chain as possible. Security control hardening, the fun part. So what is security control hardening? So the security control hardening phase of active defense mission involves security control technology owners to design and implement new detections and response logic. This could be a new firewall rule, or a new indicator of attack going into your EDR platform, or some other type of hardening, so like a GPO based hardening, things like that. So the guiding force behind the changes to the security controls are the gaps that us as Purple teamers call out based upon the results of our security control validation testing phase, right? So the security control hardening allows technology owners such as endpoint detection and response, email hygiene, and NOC teams to harden, the organization's email network and endpoints based upon our Purple team assessment findings, right? So this can get complex kind of really fast depending on the teams that were involved in the active defense mission. As a Purple teamer, we try to strive to know just as much as we know offensively as we do defensively. So we try to make sure that we know enough offensively and defensively, and also about each of these security products and controls in our environment, so that we can best help assist these technology owners that are involved, EDR, email hygiene, and things like that, so we can help them implement these controls where they might not have enough technical depth or understanding of how these TTPs actually work and are executed on a host or a network. So red team and purple team, technology owners, EDR, email hygiene, those types of teams, and again, cyber threat intelligence, critical to being involved in this process to implement control hardening or new detections, new rules, and things like that. We have found that Sigma works. It works very well because it is vendor agnostic. Again, we're able to develop that quickly and get that to an appropriate team who could then use that Sigma rule and convert it to be vendor specific and implemented and tested a lot quicker than just building something kind of in the wind, so to speak. All right, so I've talked a lot about the process already, but we'll just cover some of the steps in the process more specifically. So the CTI team will leverage Purple Team's current state analysis of the security controls and give a briefing to the technology owners and work together to design improvements to alerting logic, host-based controls, based upon Purple Team recommendations. The email hygiene team will ensure that they create new rules to block known or suspected Turlo phishing attachments. are they coming in specifically with like OLE type of documents or PDF documents or docx or just a doc? They could take a look at that and develop their own custom rules for their email security platform. The EDR team designs and tests new alerting and response logic, creating new indicators of attacks that are very TTP specific. Do we have run DLL making an odd process call and then spawning a new process? Does this happen within seconds or within minutes? EDR is the team to take care of more of the host base, TTPs, boots on the ground. We have a threat executing on a host, and that ensures that the endpoint sensors will respond appropriately and properly to our example, Turtle activity, right? And any other active defense scenarios. The NOC team, they'll evaluate the current IDS rule sets to determine what rules need to be added or activated to detect whatever command and control communication an adversary like Turtle is using. Are they using DNS? Do we need to take a look at the size of our DNS request and determine, can we just block any DNS request that is too large because it's suspected command and control, or we know for a fact that it would be command and control in our environment, for example. So some deliverables in this control hardening phase, a list of security control improvements, and metrics on time to improve the security control. So you'll notice a trend here. We're taking a lot of metrics so we can measure each phase of the process along the way as we do these throughout time. We can see where our processes are either efficient or not efficient, and improve those processes throughout each phase to get better and better. So we can complete one of these active defense missions faster, get detections and controls hardened faster and more efficiently, which leads us to being more secure quicker, which is the goal. So this is another screenshot of security control hardening results. This is taking a look at, again, MITRE attack tactic, MITRE attack technique that we specifically tested from the purple team side. And did new endpoint detection logic get created? What did new IDS rules get created? Things like that. So we can say, that we created new EDR detections for all of these TTPs that were executed during the active defense mission, but we couldn't create new IDS rules because some were not applicable. But it's good to show that, right? Because we don't want these teams thinking that we need to try to make a rule as an IDS to take a look at PowerShell being executed on endpoint or something like that. Because again, they might not have the offensive technical depth to realize that they wouldn't need to do something like that. Plus, it helps us as an organization understand the coverage that we have across our security controls related to Turtle. So we're rolling into security control validation retesting. As Robert has highlighted, as part of the process, we conduct that initial security control test, and then control hardening is completed. So we move to the next phase of retesting our controls. So a security control validation retest is the same exact thing as the initial security control validation test. It is a 1-for-1. Nothing should change. Your TTP should be executed exactly in the same manner as you did the first time that you did security control validation testing. If it isn't, it no longer is a retest. It becomes a whole new test. So we want to do our best to avoid making changes like that. Unless there's some very crazy specific reason for that to change, it should never change during a retest. So why we do this? So we do this to check ourselves, right? So we just did all that security control hardening, and now we need to reestablish what our our new efficacy is of our organizational security controls after they have been hardened based on the techniques used by the adversary of interest, Turla in this case, right? And again, this is similar to the first security control validation test. Red or purple team and CTR are heavily involved in this phase. Again, similar, very, very similar, 1-to-1, right? So purple team has the attack model already from CTI provided intelligence. Purple team again runs an automated or manual test of Turla's in the wild techniques to test the efficacy of the organization's security controls, reusing the previously provided MITRE attack threat model, right? So 1-to-1. Purple team produces another current state analysis of the organization's security controls that are in the scope of the AD mission. And then purple team takes that and briefs the CTI team with the new measurement of the security control validation assessment results and any new recommendations that might come out of that, right? So during the retest, somebody might have implemented an incorrect, endpoint detection rule, or something got messed up during implementation of that rule or testing of that rule, and it wasn't covered specifically to the TTP that was tested. This retest will uncover that, or should uncover that, right? That's what we're looking for, and then another recommendation can be built, and more assistance can be provided, right? So phase deliverables, security control validation assessment results, security control improvement recommendations, and then metrics on the security controls again, right? We're metricizing every step of the way. So we know what is efficient and what is working for us. Where do we need to assist more heavily with another team or something like that, right? So same chart, we've seen it in the previous slides. MITRE attack tactic, MITRE attack technique, pre-mission endpoint detection rate, right? You can see in our example of pre-mission, we didn't have very good coverage in a lot of areas, but post-mission, after that security control hardening, we're now 100% covered on our detection rate across the entire tested attack lifecycle, right? So this builds confidence within the organization that we are protected from Turla-based TTPs, until they decide to develop new ones, right? Which is why this process should be continuous. But this gives leaders, the organization as a whole, a view of where we were and where we're at now, and building that confidence with your leadership based upon these types of missions and results is critical to becoming, or having a world-class security program, in my opinion. All right, reporting and lessons learned.
My favorite.
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the keys to a successful mission recap. You need to have an executive summary. Doing this for a while now, I can tell you that if you keep it to one page, it will be really appreciated by your leaders. It's not that they don't want to read your reports. I know I've turned in reports over 100 pages, but it's all they have time to do is read the executive summary. In a similar vein of thought, use graphics. You can represent several paragraphs in a single chart to it. It'll go a long way in ensuring that your leadership team appreciates the style of reporting you have. Keep it as simple where possible. Don't use this as an opportunity to show how awesome and technical you are. The point of the mission is for the consumer to understand and get value out of your report. Have a style guide and follow it to ensure the document is congruent throughout. I have many times gone through reports where the style of writing changes midway through, and it absolutely detracts from the value of the report. By having a style guide, there's a step-by-step process you or your analysts can follow in creating the documentation, reporting, and your consumer knows what they're going to get every time they read your reports. It establishes that trust Robin was talking about. Seek feedback of draft versions before sharing it out. That seems like something simple, but even if you're not getting concrete recommendations, push on the individuals or groups that you have look at your reporting, see where you can do better, highlight the successes and failures of the mission, an opportunity for improvement no matter the result. So even if the mission went perfect, look for opportunities to improve it. And if there were failures, that's a good thing. You're the one testing it. You're not Turla in our scenario. Include a recognition section to share credit with all members involved. It's not one team or another. It's teamwork makes the dream work. Cybersecurity is a team sport. I have a lot more of these, and I don't want to get annoying with y'all, but in reality, it's important for everyone to work together. These missions only work if multiple teams share their resources and focus under the idea and accept the belief that this actor that we're emulating or this campaign we're emulating, this malware we're emulating, is important for us to test because there's a realistic threat on our organization, and we're all here to keep the organization safe. Yeah, the next slide, please, Robert. Remember your target audience. I'm gonna say it one more time. Remember your target audience. If you're writing to the CISO, it's different than writing to your security operations manager. Know who you're talking to and consider having variations of your report for those stakeholders I just mentioned. By tailoring it to that specific audience, that consumer will get more out of the report and be able to do more with the work you've done. Reporting gaps or issues at the end of the mission, make sure that anything that you haven't fixed or remediated is called out. Use your organization's methodology for findings and tailor it to your organization's methodology. Again, it's about the consumers. It's about somebody being able to consume the gaps that you've called out and then work to fix them in the long term. Good recommendations are underpinned by industry standard and accepted methodologies or frameworks, cough, cough, NIST. It's important for you to bring it back to industry standard and accepted methodologies. That adds more fodder to the fire. It makes more likely that your consumers will accept the recommendations you're providing them. And most importantly, always hold a post-mission debrief with all parties who participated. You will be able to get amazing improvement ideas on things you never even thought of. As a mission leader, and I've run many of these, I can tell you that every time I hold the post-mission debrief, we come up with something new and a way to improve our missions. And I can say I think the missions we run now are pretty damn good. Um, they get better every time because of having this post-mission debrief. Next slide, please. So lessons learned after action reporting. So this is a fun slide. This helps those who have difficulties with lessons learned in a very simple way. You look to answer what happened and what was supposed to happen. What can we learn about what actually happened? And why was there a difference if there's a difference? So we make sure that we keep actions are observed, facts and evidence, and then we try to keep out shared opinions and perceptions and really stick to what actually occurred and the facts that back up what happened. Carmen, anything you want to add on after action or lessons learned?
I agree with Robert. Removing your opinion as much as possible, especially with failures, it can be difficult. But clearly laying out the facts and showing the evidence and speaking to that, it goes a long way. It removes, the bias that you might have based upon a failure or success. If your team succeeded, you might feel really good about that, and you might have a lot to say that kind of drives you being biased in your opinion about the other teams or something like that. You have to remove that.
All right, next slide, sir. Question and answer. We're going to take some time and go onto the Discord. If you have any questions for us, we'll be there and happily answering any questions. Can you go to the last slide, please? Big thank you to our CactusCon hosts. We really appreciate it, and it was a big honor to speak here. Thank you, and that's Active Defense.